And I want to say this to the television audience, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook.
Hi, my name is Eric Harrison, and welcome to my non-partisan, neutral news channel, Political Tricks, where I mean to uncover all the sneaky little tricks that politicians and the media use on both sides of the aisle to prevent us from having a functioning democracy. So welcome to the world of political tricks.
Congressman caught lying about his background is talking publicly about it for the first time.
Did I embellish my resume? Yes, I did. And I'm sorry.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House! Ah! Please clap.
I don't know why that's funny.
And maybe that's a question you should ask China.
Yeah, mocked, I guess that's the word, yeah.
They know what bills are going to be passed. They buy a shitload of stock, and they pass these bills, and they make enormous profits.
I'd do it again in a minute.
And you know what? When I need something from them 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me. So what? And that's a broken system. So what'd you get?
I couldn't reconcile it. Now I can.
And so the political trick we're going to look at today is the widely used logical fallacy known as the Strawman Fallacy. The Strawman Fallacy is a common trick used by the mainstream media and politicians to paint their political opponents in a negative way. And they do this by distorting their opponent's argument to make it easier to attack or refute. Basically, they're extrapolating a different meaning from what was originally said or intended. Obviously, the Strawman Fallacy is a very common trick, and I think most of us have been strawmanned at least once in our life. But to get a better sense of it, let's take a look at it in a more popularized context.
What do you think the chances are of a guy like you and a girl like me ending up together?
Not good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of a million.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
I think it's safe to say that Lloyd Christmas was extrapolating a different meaning from what was originally said or intended there. For our next example of the Strawman Fallacy, we're going to be taking a look at a clip from the Piers Morgan Show, where a panel of 3 Democrats and 1 Republican will be discussing the recent prosecution of Donald Trump for the petty crime of paying off Stormy Daniels. And it's going to be within that context of debating whether or not this was a political witch hunt or a legitimate case that we're going to see the Strawman Fallacy used.
This is a case where the prosecutor simply decided to get Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. I voted against him. I'm a liberal Democrat, but I care more about the weaponization and distortion of the criminal justice system.
Why go down this route of really overinflating a state misdemeanor about a fling 20 years ago and then a bit of paper shuffling? Now, Benny, let me bring you in here. There is a but here. Yes, he's raising a ton of money, but also I saw a poll in Reuters saying that 10% of registered Republicans are less inclined now to vote for him. 25% of independents indicating they might be less inclined to vote for him. Now, it's the first poll really that's shown that, but if that starts to be a trend and that is the effect of this conviction, that's going to be a problem for Trump.
Yeah, I think there's a much bigger problem at play right now, Piers, and I'd really like to clear the table here as we have this conversation, because we need to actually talk about what's happening, because what's happening here is not normal in America, not in this country. In this country, we don't have a tradition of locking up the leading political candidate 5 months before the election, no matter who that candidate is or no matter what party they're part of. Not if you're a Republican, not if you're a Democrat, not if you're Green Party or Libertarian. Doesn't matter. That's not part of our tradition. That's not normal.
So Benny actually makes a very good point here that the mainstream media often fails to make, and that's that we don't prosecute our presidents before an election. And the reason for that is actually twofold. The first reason is a little bit less important. It's a little bit more controversial in my opinion too, is that we don't want to hamstring our presidents from doing what they feel like they need to do in order to forward the interests of this country. So like let's say in a war, we don't want them to feel timid in prosecuting that war, because later they might be accused of war crimes for bombing some strategic location where a lot of innocent people died. So that's one reason. And I know it sounds counterintuitive. I mean, we don't want to hamstring our presidents. We want them to do the best they can for us. But at the same time, if we were to prosecute a president, it probably should be for something big. Like failing to fix the Flint water crisis where people were literally poisoned. Or, the sloppy or incompetent or corrupt prosecution of a war, where an entire family is taken out, by a drone strike, or, a 2,000-pound bomb is dropped on a child. I mean, that seems a lot more cogent of an argument for prosecution than going after Donald Trump for, falsifying business records to conceal the fact that he, paid hush money to Stormy Daniels to keep that information from the public. But the main and most important reason why we don't want to prosecute our presidential hopefuls before an election is because we don't want to mess with the integrity of our democracy. If we were to establish a tradition of going after our presidential hopefuls before an election, that would put the power to control who ran for president into the hands of the special interest groups that had the power to make such prosecutions a reality. And that would just be bad for democracy. So it's clear that Benny's making a very good point here. But what he does next is take it to another level, and that's where the Strawman Fallacy comes into play.
There is a tradition, however, that my fellow panelists may be part of, and that's called being a Stalinist. If you like this kind of thing, you're a Stalinist. You're a show me the man, I'll show you the crime kind of sycophant, psychotic, dictatorial tyrant. And this is the type of nature that has overtaken what used to be called the Democratic Party. Alan Dershowitz is part of it. This is Stalinism.
So before I dive into this rich content, I just want to get this one piece out of the way. I know there's some people out there who are thinking that this sounds more like an ad hominem attack or a false equivalency fallacy, and it could be considered that, but in my opinion, it is more of a strawman fallacy because he's comparing their position to what a Stalinist position would be. And so he's strawmanning their position in this way. And so overall, I think it's pretty clear what Benny was trying to do here, and that was to strawman his opponents into having a position that they didn't hold. I mean, they're obviously not Stalinists. They don't want to execute their political rivals. They don't want to send them to work camps to work them to death. They don't want to starve like millions of people for political gain like was done in Ukraine by Stalin during the Holodomor famine. They don't have any of these positions. They could be accused of having a fascist position because they're trying to mess with an election just through petty accusations or petty criminal prosecutions. But even that doesn't seem like what they're trying to do. That seems more like an oversight. Seems like they really didn't understand the founding fathers' vision of allowing even felons to run because they wanted to maintain the integrity of election cycles. If anything, it seems like they're of the opinion that anybody who commits a crime should be prosecuted. Everyone's equal under the law. So it seems like they're coming from that moral stance, and that makes sense. But it's not the highest principle or the highest order of the day here. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And don't forget to comment, like, and most of all, please subscribe. Thank you so much.